Welcome to Women Winning Divorce. I am your host, Heather Quick. I am an attorney, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Florida Women's Law Group, the only divorce firm for women by women. I love thinking big, thinking outside the box, creating creative solutions for women, and empowering women to win in all aspects of their life. Our approach at Florida Women's Law Group is to provide women with a strategy to not only achieve their objectives, but win at life. I believe that what may show up as adversity is simply an opportunity to change and improve your life. In each episode, I sit down with innovative professionals and leaders who are focused on how you can be your best self before, during, and after divorce. In these conversations, we are looking at how women can win at life. I have the unique opportunity to meet women when they are at a transition period of life. But that is only the beginning to becoming your best self and winning at life on your terms. With our guests, we enjoy the opportunity to explore ways all women can win and enhance their life, no matter where they are in their journey. Because divorce is just a point in life, not the end and not what defines you, rather a catalyst for your growth.
Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. And today I'm being joined by Rhonda Noordyk, certified divorce financial analyst, which, okay, we're going to get into that, I promise listeners, and founder and CEO of the Women's Financial Wellness Center, which sounds awesome. Also, Rhonda is the host of the Divorce Conversations for Women podcast. Welcome, Rhonda. That's a lot. That was a mouthful.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being on here. There is so much just within your intro that we have got to talk about, because today we are talking about how to prepare your finances for divorce. And I do want to talk, I have met over the years and worked with many certified divorce financial analysts, but I want our listeners to really understand what that means, because it's an important designation that not everybody has, for sure. Not a lot of people have. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the certified divorce financial analyst credential, if you will, right, is something that really is intended to help financial experts dive a little bit deeper into the aspects related to the divorce process. And, what's interesting is prior to me starting my company, which is almost 9 years ago, I was in the financial industry. And I left to be able to open up Women's Financial Wellness Center. And so I'm using my CDFA credentials a little bit differently, in a sense that I'm not affiliated with a particular firm. I'm not, doing investment portfolios. I'm not selling insurance. I'm specifically helping women navigate through the financial aspects of the divorce process. And when it's completed, then I start that process over with somebody else. So I've developed a lot of processes and systems to help women just really make good, empowered decisions as they're going through the divorce process.
Well, and that's so important. And, I really think it's an advantage for women when they have someone separate from their legal team, making them, we're not helping them necessarily make all these financial decisions, but we're discussing them, and what we're looking at where they are now, what exists, and, how to, what assets mean, helping them understand that. But obviously if they can get more education from an expert in that area, but also that'll give them more insight into what they do want for their future, which is really what we're trying to do as we are going through the divorce and helping them look at, well, not all assets are the same, and which ones will help you achieve your goals in the future. And, this is your budget now, and, we have alimony in Florida, and if they're a candidate for that, how is that going to help you to where you want to be? So having someone with those credentials, resources, and experience, I think, makes such a big difference for women going through a divorce. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it helps the attorneys, right? Because a lot of times the attorneys are saying, okay, what is it that you want? And the clients are like, I don't know. Like that sounding board, right? I just got off the phone just before we hopped on here with a client who was saying the same thing. Like the attorney's like, okay, do you want to keep the rentals? Do you not? What is this? And she's like, I don't really know that. So it's
Yeah.
actually hindering her from making a decision where I'm going to hop on with her. We're going to spend an hour, talk through some of those things, and she'll be in a better position to go back and say, okay, I have some clarity now on how I want to move forward. And that's great. Right. And then the attorney like you can help navigate through, those next steps once that decision has been made.
Absolutely. And what happens many times, and I know you have seen this as well, is the women were entering the divorce process, and all of a sudden they have a lot of decisions to make, often, right? And that's something if you're not used to making a lot of decisions in a day, you just don't have that experience, and it can be so overwhelming, and like you just haven't used that muscle of making a decision. And as a business owner, and we have a lot of decisions, so that muscle gets used a lot for us. But as women coming into a divorce, they may not. And even if they're used to making decisions, say in their professional life or even with the children, these are so foreign and it seems so monumental, like these decisions. And do I want to keep this property, or do I want to sell the house? And it's a lot, and it can be so overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely.
You shared a little bit. I wanted to about how you came to specialize, in divorce finances. So you were in a financial firm, right? Like all those investment companies, with probably a group of people. And I know you said, you really wanted to become more specific and focus, I think, on women, right? Going through this process.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and really the precipice for my decision was in my area, right? And I work all over the country, but at the end of the day, right, there was a healthcare facility that was launching in my area, and it was designed to help women, and they really wanted to revolutionize the experience for women that were going through, different stages in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, gosh, I wish there was something like that from a financial perspective. And that was very early on in my career, in the early 2000s, in the financial industry. And I had a lot of women coming through my door saying, Rhonda, I'm overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. I don't know what direction to be going. And I just remember thinking there just has to be a better way, right? And I thought there would be a better way already existing in the marketplace. And at the time, there wasn't. So I developed Women's Financial Wellness Center to be that space for women. And it's just been really, really fantastic. I mean, my thought, right, similar to yours, is we want to get them through the process, but I want them to come out of the process with a better understanding of the finances and have a greater confidence for their decision-making capabilities.
And to really a great start to their future, and really, set them up for success. And I think it's amazing, and I have not heard of anything like that anywhere. Really specific for women and financial wellness. I want to understand my finances and help, be in control, so that then I can have some freedom with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's really interesting is, I don't hate men. I mean, like a lot of it, no, I just want women to show up and be empowered and level the playing field, so that they can make good decisions. And I think that's really important. I mean, there's been times when women will say, well, I don't want to take my husband to the cleaners. Well, neither do I. I mean, we don't want to do that, but we also don't want you to feel like, you are having to struggle more than you need to after the divorce process is over either.
Right. Well, and I don't hate men either. I just want to help women, right?
That's right.
So
That's
there's
right.
the difference. It's just kind of like, hey, I just want you to win.
That's right.
I don't really care. I'm not trying to make him lose, but I want you to win.
That's right.
And the law's not going to allow me to take him to the cleaners, but hey, if I can do that for you, I will. I got to tell you, I will, because I want to get you absolutely as much money as we can, because this is it. This is the one shot. So I really do. I do feel strongly about that, because I do know the law is basically going to split it in half, and then we have alimony and different support. But I am committed, and our team is, to get you in the best situation we possibly can.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
The male, your husband may think you're taking him to the cleaners, but the reality is it's not. So
exactly.
But anyway, now let's talk a little bit. For our listeners, I'd love to help them understand as far as the certified divorce analysis and that certification, how that differs from, say, a CPA or a forensic accountant.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so first of all, the CPAs are specializing in tax, right? But they're not necessarily doing the projections. They're just looking at, the situation for now and giving some guidance and direction around the tax aspect. A lot of the forensic accountants are CPAs by trade, and then they have additional credentials that allow them to specialize in doing the forensics, which, a lot of times people will hear from their attorney, oh, you should get a forensic accountant. But a lot of times people are, I don't really know what that means, right? So it's basically where they're going back and they're tracing and looking for trends. They're looking for, lost, wasted, hidden money and things like that. It's a very detailed, specialized area. My role and the way that I run my business is to be able to have a strategy, look at the big picture, figure out what we need to do. And I have a specific process that I take women through that takes each of the pieces related to the financial aspect. But one of them is identifying gaps. And that's where we take a deeper dive in looking at, are there areas where you might need to pull in an additional expert, like a forensic accountant, like a business valuation expert? And if you do, what are you looking for? And what's the scope of their engagement? So I always look at those forensic accountants, business valuation experts as add-on services that not everybody's going to need, but if they do, how do we identify if they're a good candidate for that service? What does that look like? What's the scope of the work? How much is it going to be? And do we think that we can move the needle by engaging those services? And so my role is kind of a sounding board for people, as it relates to that. And then once that information comes available, we get the report back. I review the report and then figure out, okay, how does that fit into the whole picture?
And that is so helpful because, that's what they need. And it's helpful you've done that analysis, like, hey, these are the assets. This is what, at least from my perspective legally, when we're looking at experts, they may need to educate me on, what it is you have and, how those are going to be treated, those assets. But usually we got to educate the judge, and I'm not the one to do that. We need somebody potentially to come in and testify and say, of course, all these assets, aren't, treated equally. And, particularly like you made that comment earlier about rental properties. Oh my gosh, that opens up a lot, and there can be a lot of different tax treatment and ramifications so it matters because not all these assets are the same. And so it's so often important that that expert has, evaluated that, explains that to the client as well as the attorney, but sometimes ultimately the judge or through a mediation process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, have you ever worked in a collaborative divorce team or any of those types of situations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am trained in the collaborative process. And usually I'll play one of two roles. So traditionally, the collaborative process is where there's a financial neutral, and that person is intended to crunch the numbers and provide education for both of the parties. But there are times when I'm actually the advocate behind the scenes. I'm aware of the collaborative process. I'm working with my client to be able to help them show up to those collaborative meetings and educated and empowered, because the neutral can't really give advice or direction. They're there to help
Correct.
Educate and present the data. And so that has been really helpful. And I think knowing the different options, I love the collaborative process. I think it can be very, very helpful. But the role that I play kind of depends on the dynamics of the situation.
And that makes sense. And, I think, when I know you have some statistics and things about divorces, particularly with women, because I think there's a reason, we're drawn to help women in this case in divorces, particularly financially, because what do the statistics tend to show?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we know that women initiate, right, divorce 69% of the time. And I always say the reason for that is because women have a threshold for putting up with stuff. And then when they're done, they're done. Like, I've given you so many opportunities over the last bunch of years, right, to get it together. And finally, then they're just like, I'm done with this. So 69%, we know that. Most of women spend at least 2 years contemplating. I think, thankfully, by the time they reach out to me, they're usually fairly ready to go. But I think that that's important for people to realize too, like, hey, they don't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm getting divorced. They've been thinking about this. They've been contemplating. They've been spending energy and time trying to figure out what direction they want to go. And then the last one that I think is really relevant, particularly to the work that I'm doing, and it's actually part of my mission, is to help alleviate the number of women whose lifestyle goes down after divorce. And we know that it typically goes down about 41%. And I have some very specific reasons why I think that happens. I think there's manipulation. I think there's, bullying that happens. And I think at the end of the day, it can also come down to transparency. Do we have a full picture of what's going on? And do the women understand, what they're signing or signing off on, right, prior to them doing that? So there's a lot of factors that go into it.
I think so. And one of those is exactly what you said. And I like that, bullying, because I think, women, they've been thinking about this, they're ready, they're done. And there is a tendency, and this is just what I have found in my experience over so many years of helping women through divorce. They're like, I just want it over. I'm just doing it. And oftentimes we give the kind of the pep talk, the speech, but it's like, we're almost there. And I know you are scared to death of a trial. However, just this deal that they're offering or where they are in mediation and these tactics, you will do better in front of a judge. The law is on your side, and you're better off if you can just hang in there, because we're almost there. It is going to make a huge difference, for your future. And but many times, women don't have that advice from either someone like you or their attorney, and they just, I can't deal with it anymore. And so they end up settling for less than they maybe have been entitled to, and not fully thinking through their future, which we all have that conversation with them as well, because we're doing your divorce now, like we are dealing in the present, but I am thinking about you in 3 years from now. And so that's what I want you to think about, because all these things, you're like, I don't want this, I don't need this. It's like, well, but you really do, and you're going to feel different in 3 years. And so let's take a pause and try to really think about your future as we go through this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's talk a little bit about the first things women should do, as far as taking some financial steps for themselves when they're ready to file, or maybe they've already filed. I mean, what would you advise, some things that they begin doing that can help empower themselves forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I think is related to the expenses, right? And I think it's a great time for people to be able to jot down what the expenses are, start being more aware of spending habits and things that are going on there. I really believe that the budget is essential for helping to navigate through future negotiations. And I know that, as part of most of the disclosure statements, right, for the financial aspect, there is a section on expenses. And I think at the end of the day, it kind of gets minimized, but it is really important because it's the baseline for being able to answer all of the what if questions. Can I buy the home? Can I refinance? How much can I pay for health insurance? I mean, all those questions really come back to the budget, and it does play into the support conversations as well. Very much so, right? So that's one that I would say, is certainly an important part of it. The other part is, starting to gather and organize financial documents. And I know that this can be overwhelming for people, but I always say women make really good private investigators when they have to be, because all of a sudden they're like, oh, look, I found in the recycling bin a bunch of statements. Oh, imagine that. Like they find they find things, which is awesome, right? So, that can be really helpful. Certainly if people cannot get access to information, I know that's where, the legal aspect comes in, right? And being able to leverage some of the whether it's, interrogatories and asking those questions, or, subpoenaing information. The attorney plays a really important role in getting some of that information. But the biggest question is, where do we even start looking? Because, you're kind of relying on, both parties to be transparent. So one of the things that we will sometimes do is engage private investigators to help with asset searches. And it's very fascinating because we are usually able to really identify some clues that then at least helps the attorney know where to be looking. And it's been a game changer for many of our clients. My role in that is to help facilitate that and then help get the information back, take a look at it, review it, and then deliver that to the client. So they're just not getting a lot of information that can be a little bit of a sucker punch sometimes when you're like, he has what? Where? What's going on? So it can be a little bit unsettling. Two other things really quick. One is requesting the tax transcripts from the IRS. If you're not able to access previous tax returns and you're like, I think I've quote unquote signed them in the past, but haven't seen any, that's an easy way for people to be able to request that information. The caveat to that I learned recently that's a little tricky is if they haven't filed joint in the past, which they're married and filed separate, then they're not going to be able to access that. But as long as they've filed joint, so it's a good way for them to gather information. And then the other part that I have found that just kind of helps neutralize some of the emotions around the finances is when you find information, you find a statement, you find an email, you find something that is you say, isn't that interesting? And what it does is it helps kind of neutralize the what is going on here? We get kind of emotionally charged. So it's a good place for people to just kind of remember.
Well, I think that's great, right? Remember being curious, although very often, like you said, you're going to be like, yes, what? Like this happened, what? Like, so the anger, there are going to be emotions.
For sure.
So I know that it's difficult to, keep that in play. But again, it's being curious and understanding that's the first step is getting all of this information. And then we'll figure out what to do with it and how, how it plays out for everything, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also, I think you were going to say something about like the credit, like getting your credit report can also, because then you might have more things under your name that you were aware of as well, right? So that can be a very good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite tools related to that is Credit Karma because it's, free. And it gives us proactive. So rather than us having to go out and pull the credit report and kind of remember to stay on top of it, it's out of sight, out of mind. It sends us an email or it sends us a text message when there has been a change to the credit report. And so I've been using it for 8 years just as, a great way to be able to monitor that. And it's been helpful to see.
And that really is great for everybody with like so much that goes on, with identity theft and everything. And again, increasing your financial intelligence, awareness, just it's a good thing for anybody. But well, let's take a short break. That's a good spot. We'll be right back. And if this is your first time listening to Women Winning Divorce, I'd love to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review if you are finding value in this episode. But please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back, listeners. Today, I'm joined by Rhonda Noordyk, and we're discussing how to prepare your finances for divorce. And prior to the break, we were discussing organizing your finances. Now, I know that for some of you, you're like, I don't want to organize my finances, and this is not, an interesting episode, but I encourage you to stay on because Rhonda, she has a podcast, Divorce Conversations. And you've also started a series with that, correct? A false sense of
Yes.
What is that about?
Yeah, so I wanted to do a solo series and basically was identifying some of the patterns of things that I was seeing. And one of them that we did was a false sense of amicability. Where people think, oh, we're just going to be amicable and we're going to, skip through the tulips and everything's going to be great. You're like, and then the other one is a false sense of financial security. And what I was seeing there where people would say, oh, my husband said, don't worry about it. I'll be well taken care of. He'll come and mow my grass. He'll clean the pool. I'm like, seriously, what is going on here? And what it does is it keeps women at bay. It keeps us from asking good questions. It keeps us from digging in a little bit deeper. And I'm also working on one right now on the false sense of justice and what does that look like. So, this has been a really fun episode just to address some of the things that I'm seeing to help empower women to say, listen, it's okay to ask questions and get engaged, as you're going through this process.
I think that's amazing because as you were saying that, right, like he's going to keep going mowing the grass. I mean, I'm glad I'm not the only one who's heard that from a client, and I know he's not. Like that is not true, and that like whole paternalistic approach, like you're going to be okay. It's all I'm going to take care of you, and maybe not, but like you still ought to ask questions and not be afraid of, oh, but if I push him, then he won't. And if I ask, or if he thinks, and that's really hard because, of the dynamic that the relationship had. And for a lot of women, I know that's a struggle. And so I think that is an amazing series to help them hopefully see it differently. And that's the whole thing. Like, why is it so wrong for a woman who says, well, I want an attorney and I want to be educated through this divorce? How is that attacking their husband or saying, I don't trust you, or saying that I'm going to make this most adversarial thing? Like, I just want to stand up for myself. And I think too often women are more inclined to feel badly about that and feel as if that is some aggressive gesture when it's a very prudent thing to do when you're going through a divorce and you've got money, kids, if you've got anything. You ought to have legal advice on how this is going to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things I will often tell people is, listen, I think no matter what you do is probably going to tick them off. So how about you do something that's going to be helpful for you? It's true.
It is. And right. And I mean, you guys are getting a divorce. And so it is hard. I know many women who, and even afterwards, and like there's some contempt, maybe issues, or there's some stuff, and they're like, I just don't want to upset him. Because then he's gonna stop paying, and it's a pattern that I think that they've been in for so long, and there's this power that their husband may hold with the knowledge of the finances, and I'm not even talking about any kind of abuse or anything. They just know more. Maybe they've been in control a bit more, and you just don't know, right? And sometimes things happen during a divorce, and then that can even make it more unnerving. Let's talk about this, like, because I know you have some other comments, like on the false sense of security, but when it's like you keep the house, I'll keep my pension. Like, how do you even know if that's a good decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the tricky part, right? I think very early on, it's easy for people because it feels comfortable to say, hey, we're just going to agree to these things. You do this, I'll do that. You keep this, I'll keep that. But I always encourage women in particular to not do that until we have all of the information, because what happens is women tend to be fairly respectful and they want to honor their word, right? And so they say yes to these things, and then they feel later like they're, well, I don't want to go back on my word. I told them I would do this. And they end up backing themselves into a corner because they now have more information, to make a good decision. And they haven't signed anything. And yes, they can still make, those decisions and change their mind, but they end up creating more inner turmoil for themselves than what they really need to. And so I just say, hey, just say, hey, I'm happy to make a swift decision when I have all of the information, and just kind of be a little bit of a broken record until we get to that point in the process to be able to help.
And, oftentimes, and I'm pretty certain this happened to you before, because I hear a lot of things that happen, and a client will come in and say, well, this is really what we've agreed to, and I just need you to tell me, should I sign this? It's like, well, I haven't represented you and I haven't seen the financials. So I don't know. I don't know if the business is worth anything. I need to know what's in the pension, what's in the house. There's a lot of things, and your goals, like it's just so much more than that. because we got to do our due diligence in order to really advise you as to whether or not these things that in theory sound good, because you don't want to have the conflict and you want to believe that he has your best interest at heart, but I would submit he's got probably his best interest at heart first, based on my experience, and you're second. And so that may just not work out as well for you. Okay, now this is great. Okay, so do you call it the DAM method or the DAM method? I don't know. Tell me about that.
Well, so here's the thing, right? So I end up calling it the DAM method, but for me, I don't swear. So it's like, it's
like
really
like the that holds the water back.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
That kind of DAM.
It is. It
right.
is. And it really ties nicely into some of my other offerings, right? I have a program that's called the Bridge. And so I say, choose the bridge over the dam. So that's good.
I like it.
So yeah, I came up with this because I just love acronyms. And I think people really resonate with it. And that is, hey, what are you experiencing when it comes to, the transparency around the financials? And I always tell people, like, be aware if you start noticing that somebody is implementing the DAM method, that becomes now a red flag for you. And then, of course, the question is, what do we do about it? Which is where, your role comes in, Heather. But at the end of the day, right, it's the D is dodging the disclosure. How many times do we say, well, yeah, but the court system says that they're supposed to have it in by, X amount of days, and those days come and go, and they just continue to avoid it, right? So that's the D. The A is avoiding getting assets valued. This could be a business. Oh, the business is doing terrible and it's not worth anything. Or a classic car that we can't Kelley Blue Book to determine what the value is. Or, a host of other things, right? So we have really tried to help educate and empower our clients to say, hey, you know what? I'm not just necessarily going to accept the value of what they tell me that they think it's worth. I just really want to have it valued. And it always ends up paying off for people, because it usually is, it's worth more than what they're being told that it is. And of course, we don't want to get in the weeds. We're not talking about the pots and pans and that kind of stuff. It's the bigger items that, the tools, the trailers, the snowmobiles,
and the collections, sometimes like the guns, and sometimes there is artwork, jewelry that it's really worthwhile, don't you think, to get?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is the only way for us to really know what those really specialty items are worth. Boats are tricky. Boats are tricky because, again, there are from my experience, a lot of the boat dealers don't really want to do that. They're like, I want to sell boats. I don't want to value them. Like, they just don't really want to do it. So we have to find people that are willing to do those types of things that not only can provide us the information, but a report that, backs up the values that they're presenting.
Exactly. And sometimes even on that, this has come up more often than not, and particularly where we're located in Florida. We are surrounded by a lot of water and, a lot of Caribbean and other countries. So I've had where they have property in another country and they're like, that's not worth anything. That's not worth anything, and like, well, how do we know? And, really, that's the thing. We can't really advise clients if we don't have something to go on on the property, or there's other things, because they do add up.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're right, the international components definitely get a little bit tricky.
Mm-hmm. But yet it's, again, just what you said, when they're avoiding getting the asset. It's like, but you want to keep it. So now, I'm always naturally. but then the M, you got to tell us the M before we can go to break.
Yes, the M, missing supporting documentation. And this is where, basically it's like, oh, hey, I've got all these accounts and here's the information, but no supporting statements, actual statements to back that up. I had a client once who came in, we were in a meeting, she came in with a legal pad and all the accounts were written down. And I'm like, well, I trust him. Great. Then let's get the supporting documentation for what's on the legal pad. And so, yeah, it's just really important to find the documents. And a lot of times with that too, the other part of it is sometimes people will create chaos with all of the documents. I mean, there's a client right now, I've got an almost 800-page document of just stuff, right? And it is well organized, but they create so much, right? In hopes that you don't ask for the other stuff that's not in there.
Yes. So it makes you suspicious for one. And so it should give you pause if you have any of those to be like, maybe I should be a little bit more diligent. At the very least, right?
That's right.
If those things are going on. But we're going to take another quick break. And if you're listening to Women Winning Divorce and it's your favorite part of the week, please subscribe and leave a review for us. And when we get back, we are going to discuss the divorce gap with Rhonda. And we will be right back. Well, we are back from our last break. And again, today I'm joined by Rhonda Noordyk. Rhonda, you've got an incredible blog on your website that discusses the divorce gap. So I would love it if you can tell us more about this phenomenon to our listeners and for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of different aspects of this, but the one area that I think is really important is what could be considered the wage gap, right? It kind of falls under that umbrella of the divorce gap. And basically what it's saying is, hey, you know what? One particular party may be further down the path than the other in their career. And it just really impacts the overall livelihood of both the parties, right? As they're, contemplating or going through divorce.
And now there, in addition to that, like what is like the idea that women then, take all the money and go off and live this lavish, luxurious lifestyle after divorce?
Right.
How often have you seen that?
Oh, I have not. I would say that I would say again, it's not that they're, taking their spouse to the cleaners and moving to, Bermuda. I mean, at the end of the day, there certainly have been times, right? Majority of the time when we're working with people, women can leave. They can establish themselves as having a really good financial, trajectory moving forward. But yeah, there is definitely a perception, right, that I think is just not inaccurate. So ending a divorce in a way that's financially beneficial and emotionally favorable requires a balance that's equal parts, right? Gathering the right information, refusing to be bullied, like we talked about, into signing an agreement that you're not 100% happy with. And people will say, well, nobody's going to be happy in the divorce. I think that I think at the end of the day, right, we have to look at things from a realistic perspective. Are we going to be 100% happy? I think when we know that we've made educated and empowered decisions, we know that we can be happy with those decisions. And we can put happy in air quotes, but it's one of those things where I think it comes down to the education and empowerment, knowing that they made a well-educated decision.
And what I agree with, and I don't like bringing happy into it because, for heaven's sakes, we already have enough emotions in divorce. I really like to look at it like, are we going to achieve your goals? And that's really how we do it. Because after years of practicing, I thought I'm going about this the wrong way. And I should not presume I know where somebody wants to be or what they want to be. I need to ask them. And we need to really have goals. And now let's create a strategy to achieve those goals. Because if we can achieve your goals and get you closer through this divorce, then you are winning. And it has nothing to do with him losing. Like, frankly, it really doesn't. It is your path to achieve your goals. And that comes with having an understanding of the financial picture, right? And understanding where you are, what exists, and depending on what state you're in, how those laws are going to apply to you. Because often, and that's why, earlier in the show, when I said, I do want to get women in the best financial spot possible. Now, if they're the wage earner, if they're the breadwinner, and I find women, it hurts them more to to give up their half their retirement and all of those things, but depending on what age they are, I explained to them, you guys live there in their 50s. I was like, you're really hitting your stride. If you're in an executive position, you're going to recoup it. And if you're on the other side, and you're not the breadwinner, it's like he's going to recoup it. So we got to, don't feel bad that he can't believe you're going to take all of this retirement. This is your retirement, because in Florida, that's marital, and you don't have a job at that level where you're going to be able to accrue that much. So it really is important, because that's where that gap, I think, totally happens, because that husband, if he is the breadwinner and doing well, he's going to receive a lot of that came out in that property distribution. And, we do have alimony in Florida and various different types, but it's not going to be half his income, even though that would be nice. And that's, I agree with most women, like, yeah, I wish I could do that, but it's not going to be half. It's going to be half of the assets and debt, but, it isn't going to be the same, right? Now it's two households. And basically it's still that one income, and you're getting some support, and the assets going to be different. But if you can begin to conceptualize like what exists and then how you can make that life for yourself, the majority of women I know that we talk to, they are worried. That is the number one fear. Like, how are we going to be financially? And I think if there is, if the husband works, and there are assets, it's not, a lot of debt and not much there. But if there is, I can say, I can't give them the figures, but I can say there's enough there. So you're going to be okay. You may not be out on that yacht, but you really weren't on that yacht before. So, if you can get realistic about your goals and how you want to live moving forward, I think you can be okay, and educate yourself, right? And get that financial wellness. So now you know what to do with what you've received out of this divorce, and how to work with other financial experts, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that's really important for our listeners, after divorce, because you see them before, maybe during, and hopefully after, to get them with somebody. Like, invest this money, right? Understand and still play an active part. Don't repeat that pattern, right? With a financial advisor, not be involved in your money.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have gotten pretty much to the end of our show. I have so many things that I know that we could discuss without a doubt, Rhonda. But before we go, can you impart on our listeners what you have learned about divorce, representing and teaching women throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just like to leave with a little bit of encouragement. And that is, a lot of times when women reach out, they say, Rhonda, I'm really smart. And I say, well, yeah. Yes, that's a non-starter, right? Like, yes, you are. But at the end of the day, there's a couple things to keep in mind, and that is that you can walk in financial confidence. And the formula for that is having the knowledge and the experience. Because if we have the knowledge without the experience, it's theory. If we have the experience without the knowledge, it's trial and error. But when we have those two things working together, you really can use this opportunity. And I say it as an opportunity, right? For transformation, to re-engage with your financial confidence, to get your mojo back about the finances, to really walk in your power moving forward and make really good decisions. And I love being able to see that part as women are going through this process, and happy to be a part of that for many, many women.
Well, I thank you so much, because what you are doing in your company is fabulous. We need more of those around, but hopefully this helps with many of our listeners to know that you exist, and that there is a women's financial wellness. It's great. We got to empower ourselves, and there's no reason not to, and there's nothing to be afraid of. So thank you again so much for being on our show today. And if you or someone you know is going through divorce or thinking about a divorce, of course, reach out to us at thefloridawomensLawGroup.com or join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. The link will be below in the episode description, as well as the information to find out more about Rhonda Noordyk and the Women's Financial Wellness Center. And please leave us a 5-star review, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Women Winning Divorce. My goal is to elevate your life and the way you are thinking so that you are best equipped to win at life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. And I would love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social and join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. We welcome your comments and suggestions. We want to bring you content that helps move your life forward. Women Winning Divorce is the place for an elevated conversation on how women can thrive during times of adversity in order to live their best life.